Okay, now for the third part of our program here, we're going to display the contacts that are in our table. So in order to do that, we need to create our contacts.php page. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to right click and do new PHP file, and I'm going to call this one contacts. So again, it's a basic HTML page. We're going to say contacts is the title. Put in a header. Call it my contacts. And then what we need to do after that is we need to actually create our file, our table. So to do that, we need to get information from the database. So let's write through our steps again. So step 1, connect to the database. Step 2, create a SQL query. Step 3, here we're going to prepare SQL. Step 4, execute the command and store the results. Step 5, we'll disconnect from the database. Okay, so we're going to use the same system as before, and we'll see later in the course we'll actually put this all into a db.php file that we can just include, but for now I want you to actually write it out and get used to writing it out and understanding all these steps. So we're going to say new PDO, and then we're going to say MySQL host equals, and then we have to give our DB name, right? So we called it PHP. And then we put in our username and our password. And then, just in case there's any problems with our data set for our connection, let's turn on all of our error handling. Okay, and once again, if you're copying this, be aware where it says things like DSN and attribute, you can lightly see these gray boxes. This isn't actual code. This is, again, the PHP storms adding in this information just so that we can see, for example, that root is actually the username, not just some weird thing. So step 2, create a SQL query. So what we want is we want to see all the rows and all the columns of our table. So when we were in Workbench, we ran this command select star from contacts, and that returned all the rows. So again, this star or asterisk, that means return all the columns. If I want just one of the columns, for example the first name, I just specify the first name and I would get one column returned. Or if I want to specify first name and last name, I could separate them with commas. But in this case, I want to see all the information, so I'm going to say select star from contacts. There we go. Okay, so we went to our, I'm going to create a command called SQL, and we'll say select star from contacts. And then we prepare our SQL, so I'm going to say cmd equals, take our connection and prepare our SQL statement. You could technically put your SQL command right here inside of the prepare brackets, but it's a little nicer this way. It's a little more consistent, and when you have a very large query, sometimes it can get a little confusing with the brackets. It's just a little easier to break it out. And this is where it's a little different. We're going to create a variable to store all of our contacts. So I'm going to take my command and I'm going to send it to the method fetch all. And then we'll disconnect from the database. Okay, so at this point, all of our contacts are stored inside of a variable called contacts. And this is a special type of array where we will loop over top of it. Okay, so you remember from the fundamentals course, you would create a loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop and we're going to return the records for the first row, and then we'll return the records for the second row, and then the third row, fourth row. So first things first, we need to have, so if I hit save, at this point, if we refresh, we can see it just says my contacts, but there's no table information here really. What we want is something with some table headers. All right, so in order to set that up, we go in here and we're going to say echo. So remember, echo is equivalent to print in Java. It's going to display things to the screen. And I'm going to say, I'm going to create a table tag. And in here, we're going to have a new table row. And inside of that row, I'm going to create some headers. So the first header is going to be called first name. And then the second header is going to be called last name. And finally, we're going to put in the email address. Okay. So if I hit save at this point, and I go back here, if I refresh my screen, you can see now I have first name, last name, and email. Now they're all jammed together because there's no data in here to spread them apart. There's no styling, so of course it doesn't look so fantastic just yet, but we have our column headers here. So now what we need to do is we need to loop over top of our table. Now in order to loop over top of our table, we're going to use a for loop, and specifically we're going to use a for each loop. So I'm going to say for each, and the first thing we pass into it is our array. So it's going to have all of the contacts in it, and we'll say as contact. And so what this will do is it will, all of these rows, okay, so we can look at it as a two-dimensional array. So here is row 0, right? And then this would be column 0, column 1, column 2. So when we do this, it's going to pull out each row as the variable contact. So if we just want to display it to the screen, I could do something like echo, let's just do contact, and in here first name dot, and we'll do a new line. This is it's not going to look so great, but just to give you an idea what's going to happen here. So I'm going to hit save, and let's go look in our browser and see what this looks like. So you see here's all of the first names, and it got actually printed before our table header. It's a little crazy. So we're better off to put this output inside of the table. But what I wanted you to see is that you can access the first name elements, or for example, I could put in the last name elements, hit save, if I hit refresh, you can see there's all the last names. So let's put these in as table elements. So I'm going to say echo and we'll do a new table row. Oops. And instead of saying table header this time, I'm going to say TD, right? Table data. And inside of here, put a dot. Now I can reference my contact, and the first thing I'm going to use is their first name. Okay, and where this comes from is that's the actual column name in our table. So if I go back to Workbench, it's called first name. So I'm going to hit save, Control S here. I reload. And now you can see how it's actually put all of the information inside, for first name, inside of the table. Now, if I want to keep going with this, let's do another thing with some table data. And let's put in the last name. When we refresh this time, it adds in all of the last names. So we have a column with first name, column with last name. Granted, they're really close together and hard to read, but it definitely, we're starting to build our table. And then we can do the same thing again with our email. There's TD, and then we'll close off our table row as well. Hit save, so that's my Control S. And if I refresh, now you can see it's adjusted the column header because the email addresses are quite a bit longer. So we have a contact with all of our information. So let's go, let's go here and create a fresh contact. Okay, so hit submit, and now you can see it's saved it to our database, and now in our contacts we can see here's Happy Gilmore. So that's all the way through our full stack, right? So we've got a web form that posts to our database, and then we have a page that reads from our database. Okay, that's where we're going to end this video. In the next one, we're going to add in some Bootstrap and do some really simple styling on our table.